Following a practical, repeatable, teachable system for developing leaders is an important step to delegating decision-making and problem-solving. This is part 3 of a 5-part series on how to develop up-and-coming leaders. Stay tuned and I'll share another step to address early on that has proven to work well for me when developing leaders to make solid decisions I can trust.
Running a service business can be hard. It is not unusual for business owners in industries like contracting, home repair, auto repair, business-to-business services like janitorial, IT and accounting, and many others to feel overwhelmed by all the priorities facing them at any given time. Between addressing the needs of the customers, managing the employees, figuring out the financials, and getting processes in place, feeling like you're making significant progress on your business journey can be difficult. Welcome to Service Industry Success, hosted by Brian Harding. Each week, Brian will look at real-world strategies for building the business you are dreaming of, while also sharing tactics to get through some of the most frustrating parts of business ownership with a lot more ease. Let's get started.
For many business owners and leaders, a problem they desperately want to solve is developing effective leaders in their organization. They want to delegate decision-making, problem-solving, and to get out of the weeds, stop the burden of being held down by being mired in the day-to-day. They want to be able to focus on higher ROI activities or just take a break, get some time off, just feel like they have some help. And this is both urgent and important. And it's also common not to have certainty about where to start. So that's exactly what we're covering here in this 5-part series, just a practical series of strategies to develop leaders we can trust. So this is episode 3 of the 5-part series. So I would encourage you to go back and listen to episodes 1 and 2. And from here on out, these won't necessarily be steps to rigidly take on in a sequential order. Taking care of one before another is probably not that big of a deal. But these are concepts and strategies I would want to get out in front of earlier rather than later. So one of the things that, speaking of getting out things early instead of late, one of the things I want to get out in front of is just accepting the fact that when we put people in leadership roles, they're going to have a couple of struggles that are very predictable. I've talked about this one before, but I'm going to supplement it with a few other things as well. And one of the things I got to be aware of is they don't really know when it's appropriate to be a teacher and when it's appropriate to be a firefighter. They will naturally think that their value comes from solving problems. The reason I was promoted is because I'm good at doing these things. And presumably, the people who I will be supervising or managing are not as good as at doing these things. And so they come to believe, in my experience, and this was true for me when I was a young supervisor, and I've seen it happen numerous times as I developed leaders in my own career. They tend to come to believe that their value is demonstrated by how well they solve problems, which is partly true. But they begin to really think that that's really what their value is all about. Is if they solve more problems, they have more value. If they solve fewer problems, they have less value, and their job might even be in jeopardy, which again is partially true. But they don't have the right balance of understanding that, yes, that is true, and even more valuable is preventing problems. And so a few things happen because they don't have this context, oftentimes because nobody's ever told them. I was just fortunate to have somebody who did tell me that, and I was fortunate enough to have people who, as I was developing them, listen when I told them. But I've also seen this plenty of times where people in supervisory, especially new to the company, supervisory management roles, they kind of get fixed in this mindset of, if I'm not solving problems, they're going to think I'm not doing my job. And if I'm not doing my job's in jeopardy. So a few things can happen. They can they can just embellish the severity of a situation. So now they have a problem to solve. Something that wasn't really that big of a deal. When they show up, it's this big deal. And when they arrive on site, if you're working out of the office, or they stumble upon something with their team, something that's not really that big of a deal becomes a big thing because now they have purpose. Now they have a problem to solve. And for the employees who are reasonably confident they can take care of these kinds of problems, it's annoying. It's frustrating. Why are they stepping on me? Why are they micromanaging me? Why are they involved in this thing that isn't that big of a deal? I need a little bit of help. I didn't need you to take on the whole thing. That can become an issue. And it also keeps the developing leader from preventing future problems. If all they do is jump in and solve problems, we're not really making progress. We're not improving because in their mind, though, if they teach people how to prevent problems, the need for them, the up and coming leader, goes away. Like if there's no problems, I don't have a purpose. Now, we know that's not true. First of all, there's always going to be issues, but the real benefit in leadership is teaching people how to prevent problems, not just putting out fires. A person who can do a thing has a certain amount of value. A person who can manage people doing that thing has a little more value. But a person who can teach people how to not ever have problems again, that person has a lot more value. But that's not something that they're just going to walk in the door having. They're not going to get a promotion and go, aha, of course that's how it is. I need to prevent problems. No, they're going to think, I got to solve problems. And so if they don't know that preventing problems is much more valuable than solving problems, there's no way they're going to take that chance. There's no way they're going to just, know when it's time to, like, maybe if you take 30 minutes and teach this person how to do a thing, and that solves us, you know, 50 hours, man hours over the next year of not dealing with this, like that's a pretty good investment. There's no way they're going to think that in the beginning without some guidance because they're going to feel like they're putting themselves out of a job. They're going to feel like if I don't demonstrate that I'm doing a thing, like the boss can't call and say, "What are you doing?" I say, "I'm helping Johnny with this." I don't have any value to the company, and they're not going to think I'm not doing anything, and they're going to think they can do without me. But in my case, for me, I wanted people not to just fight fires, which again, it's important sometimes, but I wanted them to teach people how to prevent those same repetitive mistakes from happening over and over again. Now, that requires a couple things though. I have to be aware of this, and they have to be aware of this, and they have to be aware that I'm aware of this, meaning I'm just going to tell them, like, I know when you're new in a supervisory management role, one of the things that will happen is you'll think that all of your value is derived from how many fires you put out. I want you to know for me, that's true. And it's even more valuable to prevent fires. But here's the twist: we have to agree upon the criteria they will use to make the decision between when it's appropriate to be a firefighter and when it's appropriate to be a teacher. When facing a problem, what would tell them in this instance and others like it when they should jump in and just put the fire out and push people outside and just like, I'm taking care of this because it's urgent and whatever the criteria are, I just need to do this? And what would tell them they should take more time and teach the employee to make sure this kind of problem doesn't happen again? Now, sometimes this is easier than others, and I get that, but we absolutely need to have clarity in this. Sometimes we really do need them just to put the fire out, but this doesn't help us improve. If all they're doing is that, we're not really making progress. On the other hand, we can't be a teacher all the time. We got things to do. We got time frames to work within. We have deadlines to meet. We have expectations from customers. Like it can't be too much of the one or the other. We have to have balance here, but they have to know case by case which is the right path for this one. And if they don't know, I promise you, they're not going to risk making the quote unquote wrong call. They're going to take the safer action. And the safer action is just to keep putting out fires. So, in order for this to have this agreed upon criteria, of course, that means I need to know, or at least have some sense of, what that criteria is before we can have any kind of agreement on it. So, before I can even have a conversation with the supervisor about, hey, if you face a situation with a customer complaint, I'll just make up an example here. Under $500, just do what you think is best. If it's over $500, though, maybe we need to spend some more time teaching the employee how to solve this prevent this kind of problem. You could use a dollar amount kind of thing. Point is, I need to have some kind of idea, some sense before I have this conversation with them, what I think the criteria is. When they're facing a situation like, again, a customer complaint is something they're often going to be dealing with. What would tell them it's just like, make this thing go away? And what would tell them, no, we need to invest time with this employee or a group of employees to prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future? So I need to do a little bit of homework beforehand so I can get a sense of this, and then we can develop it together. Or I get a full idea of this and I declare what the criteria is going to be. Either one's fine, but we have to have agreement on that. Otherwise, there's no way in the world they're going to handle it the way I would like. Now, not only do they need help with that, in many cases, knowing the value of preventing problems is much higher than just solving them. They also need to know what they're moving towards personally in their career, in this job, in this company by teaching others. A supervisor, for example, might need to know that they're making progress towards becoming a manager. A manager might need to know they're making progress towards becoming a manager with more responsibility and more significance. People are very hesitant about moving into uncertainty. We know this in sales. We know this in hiring. We know this in life. We know this about ourselves. And it's absolutely true when developing leaders. If they feel like them taking the time to teach their subordinate employees how to do well without direct oversight is putting their job at risk, and they don't have another job of more significance or more responsibility that they're moving into, they're not going to do that. We know that a person who can teach people how to prevent problems is super valuable. That doesn't mean they will know it. This is a simple fix. And it doesn't require a lot of effort, but it does require conversations with all of them, all of your leaders, at least once in a while to keep them feeling at ease that they're not putting themselves out of work. Remind them once in a while, hey, this is why we need to make the investment to teach people. This is what the benefits for the company are. This is what the benefits for the employees are. This is what the benefits for the customers are. And there's plenty. And here's what you're moving towards. Yes, you're teaching these people at this level of responsibility how to do things without you, which is fantastic. And you're also gaining skills to move into this new role with this kind of responsibility. And this is part of the transition. If they don't have that thing they're aiming towards, they're just not going to do it. They're not going to move into uncertainty, just like customers don't when we sell them, just like people don't when we hire them, just like we don't want to do. None of us wants to move into uncertainty. This is absolutely true for them. So it requires us, of course, just like it requires us to know up front what the criteria we'd like to use for them to decide between being a firefighter and teacher. This also requires us to have some idea of what the future we have in mind for them is. And if we don't know that, we owe it to them and ourselves to figure that out pretty quickly. We can't have an expectation they just do better without the understanding or, motivation to move into something else. None of us operates like that. They have to have some kind of idea of what they're moving towards in doing this. They can't just be get better for the sake of getting better. Like there's a limit to how much they can do that. They want to know I'm safe and even making progress in my career and personally and professional development, things like that, by getting good at these skills. And I think that's absolutely critical for folks. Where I've seen people do this really well, like managers move well in teaching people how to make decisions at the lowest possible level instead of the highest possible level. The ones that do that well have known they're moving into a role of more significance and more responsibility. And they want that. People who don't do it well are people who are being forced to move into a role that they don't want to have of more responsibility and more significance, or people who have no idea that they're moving at all. I'm just a supervisor. I'm just a manager. I'm supposed to I'm just camping out here for the next X number of years. I'm not moving towards anything. Well, those people aren't going to be very motivated to teach people how to prevent problems. They're going to be very motivated to have job security and continue having problems to put the fire out for. So anyhow, I hope that's helpful. This has worked well for me in a number of cases. I've had this exact conversation with many, many up and coming managers, and it is incredibly helpful in my opinion, because this is stuff they just won't know. It makes sense when you explain it to them, but they just won't know it intuitively. They won't know it naturally. It's counterintuitive, but once they grasp it, man, does it help. So anyhow, if you find the information I share helpful, please share this podcast with a friend or colleague you think can benefit from it. Again, this series I'm doing on leadership development, this is probably the thing I've been asked about the most in the last 6 months. And so I know there's a demand for it. So share this episode with a friend or colleague. You can text it. You can send it in Facebook. You can send it on Twitter. There's all kinds of ways to do that now. And of course, public sharing is also appreciated. That's it for this week. I'll talk to y'all next week.